Okay, guys, we are live. We're waiting for Kevin Allen and Ty Anderson to join us. So Russ Cohen and I and Josh Rimmer are going to be discussing the selection of the musical performers for the All-Star game, Fall Out Boy and OAR. And I think I've heard one Fall Out Boy song in my life, and I've never heard anything from OAR. But cut me some slack. I'm 47 years old, so I'm sure those are bands that are more popular with people in their 20s. What about you, Russ?
I mean, Fall Out Boy's okay. I think I could get through them. They're not bad. I've heard a few songs, not on my iPod, but I listen to different kind of music as well. I'll admit, OAR, I haven't had the time to research them. I know nothing, but I'm hoping Josh will pick up the slack on that.
Josh, are you heavy into music or?
I'm not huge into music, but I will say I do like Fall Out Boy. Actually, one of the songs is I use in the gym all the time, and that's
my invite to Kevin must not be getting to him here, so I'm just he's calling me on the phone here. What the heck was that?
That's Fall Out Boy.
Right.
Told you I use that song as it's a good motivational song. Here, I'm sure you guys have heard it before.
I've heard it.
They play that in hockey races.
Yeah, they play that at Flyers games all the time.
Yeah, it's a good tune.
But what about OAR? I was hoping you knew something about OAR.
No idea. No idea. I mean, they're MIA to me, so.
Jeez.
I don't
You're a lot of help. Thanks there.
Yeah, I know. I'm not a big music guy.
For the research guy.
Well, wait, yeah, dude, here's somebody who knows something about Fall Out Boy and OAR. That's Ty Anderson. Ty, do you know anything about either one of those bands?
I know about Fall Out Boy. I know OAR is they have like a 9-minute jam song all the time.
Oh, are they like a
That's
fish?
more than I knew. See? That's good.
What's that?
That's more than I knew, so that's good news.
Yeah. Fall Out Boy is that's when I was in high school, like 2005. They came out with their big album that had Dance Dance, which was in a lot of it was in Madden and all those games. So
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
Oh boy.
2005 high school. That hurts, Mike.
Yeah, well, I hate to tell you when my graduation was.
1981 for me.
1985 for me.
Oh, man.
Where's my cane? Where's my cane? Boy. While I'm trying to get Kevin in here on I must be sending him the wrong invite here. Unfortunately, I haven't had this problem before, but for some reason, of course, when I'm running things, there's always a problem.
It's the fill-in.
Yeah, what's up?
While we're waiting here, the Brad Marchand slew foot of Derek Brassard. I know they're reviewing it today. Is there any indication? I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of how much of a suspension he'll get? I saw it. Usually I'm fairly liberal in terms of not penalizing for something like that, but I think he's going to get at least a couple games.
Yeah, it's tough because honestly, it's weird because technically by the NHL terms, he's not a repeat offender anymore. It's been like 3 years since his last run-in. So we'll see there. But I honestly, I think it's a suspension. I think it'll be probably 1 or 2 games. But we'll see. He wasn't available today at practice. Tried talking to him, but he wasn't available. So we'll see. But from everything, it sounds like there's going to be at least a 1-game suspension or 2 even.
Russ, you didn't see it, but you think? Oh, did we lose Russ?
We lost Russ.
Yeah, we lost. Oh boy. Okay. Things are not going well here on the HockeyBuzzCast. Let me just try to invite him again. So, boy, let's see here. And we're doing this live, folks, so we're doing it without a net.
You
You know.
want me to play this again?
Please don't play any more Fall Out Boy. Thank you.
Um,
You're a real help there. You're a real help there.
I'm now really mad I'm not going to the All-Star game. Be rocking out the Fall Out Boy.
It was weird though with the Marchand slew foot. Broussard was upset about it, but he wanted to make sure he didn't sound like a crybaby and blow the whistle and be a whistleblower. But he had a point. I mean, it's a dangerous play. It really could have injured Broussard, especially along the boards there. If he bangs into it the wrong way, that's a knee injury and that's an ankle injury that could end his season. So, I mean, he's definitely right in what he said about the hit not being a pleasant one. And I do think that you'll see him suspended. But it is funny. It's funny, not funny, maybe interesting to hear a player not throw another guy under the bus and say, hey, I like him as a player. I think he does a lot of things well, but that was kind of dirty. You don't hear that too often.
Okay. Oh, okay. Wait a second. Here we go. I think I figured it out finally. Boy. Well, I know that the All-Star game that we had two replacements yesterday. Jimmy Howard will not play because of his injury. Pekka Rinne is out 3 to 5 weeks with his injury. Now apparently it's going to be Marc-Andre Fleury. And who was the other goal? Oh, Yaroslav Halak, who are going to replace him. Yeah, hopefully I think that will get. Boy, sorry about that. Everything's just going wrong here today.
Everything is happening.
Yes. If you got another invite, I figured out Eklund's secret code. All right. Well, I think. What's that?
Bosco. It's a Seinfeld thing.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for that.
No worries.
Okay. We'll start the show right now. Kevin should be coming in any second. Here we go. Oh, and we lose Russ again.
Huh. Wow. This is turned out great so far.
Yes, I'm sorry, folks. Technical difficulties are always a wonderful thing on the HockeyBuzzCast. And so are people coughing in the microphone.
Yes, I apologize.
Are we live right now?
We are live right now, and gee, we have Kevin Allen.
Do we?
Yes, we do. He's coming in as we speak. There we go.
Hi, guys.
Oh,
technology.
Isn't it a beautiful thing?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, and we finally have a full complement here. And for some reason, I just clicked on my picture, and now I look like I have a blue haze on me right now. Does it look like I'm in a blue haze?
It's
Not really.
tint, but you look fine.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, well, let's get started while we have everybody here. And Russ, if you keep dropping out, just keep coming back in. We'll.
That's what I'll do.
Okay. All right. Today I'll do the intro. We'll go with Kevin, Russ, Ty, Josh in that order. And well, we'll introduce Russ when he calls back in. Okay. Kevin, Ty, Josh, and
Got it.
Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, January 16th, 2015.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
I'm Ty Anderson.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzCast here on HockeyBuzz.com, and we've had our share of technical difficulties so far, and hopefully we'll keep that to a minimum for the rest of the next 45 to 50 minutes. Russ Cohen should be joining us as soon as he reconnects. We're going to be discussing a couple of the games from last night, but a impending signing of a key unrestricted free agent, and the upcoming trade deadline in the next 45 minutes. Kevin, game I caught a little bit of yesterday, and I just wanted to bring it up because it's Detroit and it was a little peculiar. I turned on the Red Wings Blues game. I'd say about midway through the second period. The shots were, I believe, 15-3 in favor of the Blues. Turned it off. Turned it back on near the end of the second period, and Detroit had almost evened the shots on goal and were leading 2-0. St. Louis tied the game in the third period, scored a couple goals, and then Pavel Datsyuk scores the game winner with 3 seconds left in overtime. Kevin, the Detroit Red Wings could be the most peculiar team in the NHL.
Well, it was a great hockey game, highly entertaining. I watched that game. I was going to bop around, but I got intrigued because it was such a tug of war between the Blues and the and the Red Wings. And the Blues really limited the opportunities that the Red Wings have. But it's interesting. Of the few shots they had, all of them were prime scoring chances. Whenever they got in, they got a nice scoring chance. And meanwhile, the Red Wings actually played really well defensively in that game and kept the Blues scoring chances to a minimum. And then ended up getting a couple of goals. The fourth line chipped in a goal with Anderson tucking one in off the side of the net, and then they built a 2-0 lead. Tatar got a goal, so they also got a goal from their scoring line. And then the Blues just fought back, and again, it was highly entertaining. And they scored, they pulled their goalie, and they tied it up. And then it went into overtime, and you just assume you're going to get to a shootout, which certainly, as we all know, favors the Blues over the Red Wings. But somehow Datsyuk, as he always does against the Blues, found a way to score. But it was a real impressive win by the Red Wings, and I thought the Blues were also pretty impressive in the way they played. Both of those teams, when you watch them yesterday, give rise to what I've said all along, that anybody who gets into the playoffs in the West really does have a shot at winning the Cup. Like, the Blues, in my mind, are as good. I mean, certainly could beat the Chicago Blackhawks in a series, to be sure. And then meanwhile, in the East, with the way the Red Wings are playing now, I think they're much more of a contender than we probably thought they were at the start of the season. They're still not a perfect hockey team, and I like other teams in the East better, but they've proven they're better defensively than was anticipated at the start of the season. They've got enough offense to get it done, and Howard will be back, and he was having his best season, and in the interim, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, and if they can maintain this with Mrazek and McCollum and net until Jimmy Howard gets back, I mean, that's even a bigger feather in their cap, and I just think in a way strengthens them going towards the deadline and going towards the playoffs. I mean, if they can play effectively, and then not casting aspersions against Mrazek and McCollum, but they are two AHL goaltenders, and if you can maintain the pace that they're maintaining right now with two AHL goaltenders and then get your star goalie back, I mean, I think that just only improves their chances of doing some damage in the postseason.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And Mrazek is an AHL goalie, but obviously, he's considered, one of the better goalies not in the NHL, or at least not holding a number one job. And I think they believe that Gustafsson will be back in a couple of weeks, and he'll probably help as well. But it's an interesting team, and I like your characterization of the Red Wings as peculiar, because they're a real difficult read. I agree with that. It's hard to know what to make of them because they're not quite. They're really the merging, and we've talked about this before, of two teams: the old Red Wings with Zetterberg and Datsyuk, with the new Red Wings led by Tatar and Nyquist and DeKaiser and that group.
Ty and Russ, I wanted to talk about the Bruins and the Rangers game last night. Ty, you first. It was a 3-0 win for the Bruins. I think they've won 5 games in a row now. They're 5-0-2 in the last 7. It seems that Peter Chiarelli is indicating that Pasternak is going to stay with the team, which I think is a good decision, because he's been very effective. 4 goals in the last 3 games. Did he score last night? I didn't see if he.
No, he came close in the first period, right in front of the net there. He kind of mishandled the puck. But other than that, it was a pretty quiet game for him. But yes, Chiarelli did confirm during the first intermission that the Bruins will keep David Pasternak for the rest of the season. They will burn the first year of that entry-level deal. So this is a move that really simple for the Boston Bruins when it came back down to it. You look at what's out there in the trade market. Chris Stewart, Jaromir Jagr, Michael Ryder. These are players that really they give you an upgrade, but at what cost? Versus having this 18-year-old kid. He doesn't have experience, but he's a smart hockey player. He's got speed, he's got finish, he's got the skill they really need on that top line. So it was an easy call for them. Julien told me it was unanimous throughout the coaching staff that they wanted to keep him on board, and he's going to be around now for the rest of the season. So there's a slight positive for the Boston Bruins right now.
I mean, the Bruins seem to have turned it around. I mean, I think the last loss they had was the New Year's Eve game against Toronto in the shootout. What do you determine is the key? I mean, is it the fact that Pasternak fits in with Krejci and Lucic, and then everything falls into place? I mean, is it Rask playing well? Is it the health of Chara? What are the main reasons why there's been this turnaround over the last couple weeks?
Well, for me, it's two things. One is David Pasternak's emergence in the lineup creates a stabilizing effect throughout the lineup. The second line, the Bergeron line, can focus on their three-zone game, which is very, very strong. The Soderberg line gets to feast on third-pairing defensemen. And the fourth line's played really well, especially with Craig Cunningham, an energy-type winger on the right side of that line. So that's been a help there. But I think really for the Boston Bruins, they've cleaned it up in their defensive end. You don't see as many guys alone in the slot or these 3-on-1s, 3-on-2s that end up in the back of the net. It just seems that the Bruins aren't panicking in their own zone anymore. And that's really what makes them successful, is their defensive structure, their first pairing through their third pairing. And that's something that you're seeing right now. Torrey Krug said last night they're getting back to playing Boston Bruins hockey with the defensive layers throughout their defensive zone, through the neutral zone, and the offensive zone. And they're really sort of stymieing their opponents right now. The Rangers are a speedy team. They got around them last night for more than a few chances, but Tuukka Rask made the big saves you thought he would make. And meanwhile, Zdeno Chara is getting healthier, and he does look more like Zdeno Chara. So those are some obvious pluses for the Boston Bruins right now. But it's sort of a nice stew of everything that's working for them right now.
Now, Russ, the Rangers had been one of the hotter teams in the league. They've this week they got shut out 3-0 by the Islanders, 3-0 now by the Bruins. But that's I think a minor blip. I mean, the way this team has been playing recently, I think that they're bound for the playoffs, obviously. And I mean, do you think that they're right now in their current construct? I mean, do you think that they have the ability to add players at the deadline, or do they need to add players at the deadline, or do you think that the team, the way it is the way it's going to end up?
No, they definitely could add a face-off specialist. Someone like an Antoine Vermette would fit in really great, because against the Islanders, they couldn't win a face-off. They were awful. And the other problem was against the Islanders, the youngsters like Anders Lee and Brock Nelson just owned the crease, and Dan Girardi didn't have an answer for that. And that was something where that was a big reason they lost that game. I missed last night's Ranger game. I haven't caught up with that yet. But when I saw at the beginning that Tanner Glass had a fight, there were two things that sort of came to mind. A, the Rangers lose when Tanner Glass plays, and B, fighting against the Bruins plays right into the Bruins' hands. That's not the Rangers' game anymore, and they played right into the Bruins' hands for sure. And the Bruins did get a kick in the pants from Pasternak. I think that was pretty obvious. I saw Chiarelli at the Flyers game when he scored the 2 goals after, and he was immediately on the phone, and I was pretty sure that they were going to keep Pasternak. And I watched him in the World Juniors. Some people, I wrote about it on a website called The Pink Puck, and some people unfairly categorized his whole World Juniors based on that last game against Sweden where he was a -2, where that Czech team really was like a singular team. These guys were having these one-off shots. They were all trying to be heroes. They were all trying highlight moves, and that wasn't on Pasternak. He's a more complete player than that. And to be honest, he's got guys taking care of him now on the Bruins' top line. All that said, if he gets comfortable, he's actually a great penalty killer too. Who knows if they'll ever use him for it this year, but you never know. You never know what he actually will work into. And so I think it was a brilliant move based on the fact that, A, he's cap-friendly, and B, he's already got that speed and skill and clicks with the other guys. So, but as far as the Rangers go, they're going to make the playoffs, but they're going to just creep in, I think. When you win 13 out of 15 and you're still having trouble cracking that playoff bubble, it's not good. And what I'm noticing, too, is teams in the West now are there's not that much disparity between the West and the East. And actually the East is so much tougher than the West now that when teams go play the West Coast, they sort of like playing that finesse game, but then when they come back and play the East Coast, like they played the Islanders, Rangers got punched in the mouth in that game, they played the Bruins, similar effect. They're sort of getting this sort of hangover, and we're not going to blame it on
on the flight and anything like that, exhaustion. No, I'm blaming it on the style of play. And these division games are much more important than playing and winning and owning the West. And I think that's what they're sort of finding out now. That's the next hurdle for them.
Yeah, the Rangers swept California, and conversely, and I'll touch on this in a minute. The Leafs go out to Anaheim, L.A., and San Jose and score 1 goal in 3 games. Kevin, the big news, and it's not etched in stone right now, but from Larry Brooks in the New York Post and a number of other outlets are reporting that the Rangers and Marc Staal are close on a 6-year contract extension, in the neighborhood of the mid-5, like 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, $5.7 million a year. That's around where McDonough and Girardi are making currently. He was one of the big names, and we talked about it on previous webcasts about the possibility of Staal going to Carolina or being on the open market and what he would get. If the Rangers keep him there, they keep that top 3 group. What do you think of the price, the length of the contract, and the Rangers keeping Staal?
Well, this is a very big, important signing, not only for the Rangers but for the league. I had him number 2 on my list of top, free agents, and clearly that he's probably going to leave money on the table if he signs for that price, because I think he'd have been over $6 million. This is a two-way, defenseman who's learned under Tortorella. He's got that mental toughness that you like in a defender. Plus, he handles the puck reasonably well. He fits in real well, and it really, from the Rangers standpoint, and I'm sure Russ will have much to say about this, but this was a difficult thing hanging over the Rangers' head, because they really wouldn't have wanted to lose him and let him go and then get nothing in return. On the other hand, they're a real legitimate Stanley Cup contender, and they need him if he was going to go. So getting him signed is big, and I know there'll be a lot of disappointed teams around the NHL because there are a lot of intriguing defensemen who are going to be available. But other than Johnny Boychuk, I didn't think there was anyone quite as intriguing as Marc Staal.
Yeah, the top 3 that I had on the list of defensemen for free agency, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, with Staal signing would be Green, would be Boychuk, and would be Cody Franzen of the Maple Leafs. And if you look at those 3 names, 2 of them are on teams that are probably playoff teams and aren't going to trade those players, or more than likely won't trade those players because they're not going to weaken themselves on defense going into the playoffs. So, Anyway, but Russ, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the signing. I know you posted something on Twitter regarding the cap situation for the Rangers. They have 2 unrestricted free agents, forwards, in Marty St. Louis and Zuccarello. I can't see how they can afford either one of them unless one or both take hometown discounts.
Yeah, I don't think Zuccarello is going to take the hometown discount. I'm not sure the Rangers would even want to go deep with him right now because based on his season. St. Louis has never been a guy that's played for less money. However, because his wife wants to stay in that area and he probably wants to play another year, I could see him taking a hometown discount and getting fit in under the cap. Derek Stepan's got to get signed. That's going to be a tough one. The RFAs will, they'll work themselves out because they don't have any leverage, and Glenn Sader will grind them to dust. So, unfortunately, that's what happens to an RFA when you're a Ranger. But Stepan's going to be the tough one. That's going to be a tough one to sort of see what he's going to make, too. They have a Capageddon sort of going. I'll read you the guys. Lundqvist, McDonough, Girardi, Broussard, Nash, Staal, Boyle, and Klein equal $49 million. Even if the cap goes up to 73, that's 67% of your cap. Then if I add the bottom guys like Glass and Talbot and Dominic Moore and Chris Kreider, that's like another 6.25. So that means you have to have a lot of role players, Anthony Duclair's. You have to have a mix of role players and young players mixed in there to stay successful. So I don't like the 6 years for Marc Staal. He's not the same guy since the eye injury. He's still good. And unfortunately, with the way that we grade defensemen now in the NHL, he's way above average, but he's not above average to what he used to be. He used to, a couple of years ago, in advanced stats, he was like the second best shutdown guy in the league. He's not that anymore. His offense is there and gone. You know, it's here and there once in a while, but they don't really want him to do it. I think he could give more. I think Kevin's right about that, but he doesn't seem to work into that role. At the end of the day, they're keeping their core together, but as Girardi gets older, that could end up being the hard part of this because he's, you know, like next year, Girardi's salary floats, so he's getting $7 million next year. You know, in a couple of years, when you have 30-something-year-old defensemen and these other guys that hit their 30s, like McDonough and Staal, it could get rough. So there's a window there for them to win. But for people thinking like this is like sort of like keeping the Blackhawks together, it is in a way, but they haven't won anything. So that's where you have to wonder if is it worth it.
And this is 2/3 of their salary of the salary cap on 8 players, and that's assuming the cap goes up to $73 million, which is not guaranteed.
No.
And Ty, I mean, that's going to have ramifications with the Bruins as well because they have to get Riley Smith and Krug and some other players signed up. So it's like, you know, this is the amount of the cap and future contracts are going to have real effects on the landscape. You know, in this conversation, on top teams in the Eastern Conference, the Rangers and the Bruins.
And I really miss Cap Geek. I had to do all this by hand, so it's possible it's a little bit off.
Yeah. You talk about teams that with these contracts and all that, you know, the cap situations, things like that. There are going to be a lot more New York Islanders, you know, as the years go on. Teams that need to unload contracts they signed 2-3 years ago, and a bubble team or a quote unquote bubble team like the Islanders will scoop these guys up, and sure enough, they'll have a strong roster at the halfway point. So I mean, it's interesting sort of dilemma to have. I mean, you want to keep your core in town and intact, but with the Rangers, that seems, for me anyways, like a lot of money for Marc Staal based on everything else they have going on contractually.
Yeah, I don't think it is a lot of money, simply because, you know, any defenseman in this league with a pulse gets 2.5. You know, and then it moves up from there. I mean, most everyone is getting $4 million, and I really do believe he'd have been over $6 million on the open market just because, you know, his ability to eat up minutes and you know, boy, he would fit in so many of the top teams. They'd be pretty happy to have him. But I like the Rangers' top 4 defensive group pretty good, and I don't think that's money misplaced. I think you know, you can bring in that 4. You know, at that price, pretty much everybody's got to do that. So, and we're not that far away from, you know, an $80 million payday, and that when that happens, you know, pretty much, you know, every above average player is going to be $5 million or more. You know, so.
Yeah, I think the way things are laying out right now in the league, you're setting the landscape for quick turnarounds with some teams who have the available cap space, like the Islanders. The Islanders had the flexibility to add Boychuk and Leddy before the season, and they're benefiting from it right now. Teams like Arizona, teams like Buffalo, Florida, with lots of cap room. I know Winnipeg, Colorado as well have significant cap room. Those teams are going to have flexibility, whether it's over the summer or whether it's at the deadline, to add players and give themselves better chances to make a run in the playoffs. I mean, right now, Kevin, cap room is king in this league.
Oh yeah. There's no, you know, and I think there's going to be a lot of movement at the trade deadline. And now we're hearing that the Coyotes are going to sell off, and so that's going to put more players in the marketplace. And you know, they're going to rebuild as well. And you know, what happens in a rebuild too is you know, that's money that's not going to get spent. You know, like, you don't go in the middle of a rebuild and then suddenly take your cap up you know, near the ceiling. You know, you just don't spend it. You're near the bottom. So you know, that money won't be spent, and you know, it's going to be interesting to see the impact that'll have, because you know, Buffalo will be in the same situation. You'll have 2 strong rebuild teams that'll be down near the floor in terms of.
But I do think that Buffalo. I mean, if things work out, and you know, Buffalo lost to Minnesota 7-0. Minnesota was in one of the worst slumps. You know, I think they'd lost 12 of 13. They bring in Devin Dubnyk. They come into Buffalo and they put up a touchdown against the Sabres and win 7-0. A lot of people in Buffalo are, rubbing their hands with glee because they're only 2 points behind Edmonton for 30th. So right now, Buffalo is in position to have Reinhart as their number 2, and then either McDavid or Eichel as their number 1 going forward. But you also have an owner like Terry Pegula who likes to spend money. The Rex Ryan coaching hire in Buffalo, and he did it when he first came in with Darcy Regier and Lindy Ruff. So I think that they're sort of doing a two-pronged approach here. They're trying to build with youth. They have a lot of prospects, but they're also going to spend money as well, Kevin.
Yeah, well, I agree. But, I mean, will you do that right away? Like, I think you got to maintain some flexibility, so that as you move forward, you're in a position to get the guys who you need. And I'm not sure you're going to know, like, next season who you're going to need because you're going to want to see how that develops. So, I mean, it's tricky to rebuild just for the reasons you articulated because, you want to get there as quickly as possible. So you need to, to spend money and bring in free agents to merge with the younger players. But you don't want to tie yourself up so that when you get closer, you don't have the flexibility to get those final pieces, So there's some trickiness involved in doing it in the right order and the right timing. But I do agree with completely with your assertion that Pegula is going to be a little impatient and he's going to want to try to get it done quicker and that he's going to spend. I mean, he's a spender. He's got money. He's going to spend it.
Now, Russ, I don't want to turn this into Leaf buzz, but the Leafs, since their 6-game winning streak in the middle of December, they've gone 3-11. That was about what they did at the end of last year. This is like the 4th time in 3 years that they've had this kind of month-long just brain cramp of losing. They've already fired Carlisle. They've brought in Peter Horachuk. They're trying to play a more defensive style. They did that for 4 games, and they went 1-3. And then last night they tried to open it up a little bit and gave up 40 shots to the Sharks. I want to bring up Damian Cox, a columnist for Sportsnet, brought up the fact that he believes that the best course of action for the Maple Leafs is to blow it up completely, is to completely rebuild, maybe keep 1 or 2 of their young players, everybody under the age of 25. But the guys who are in their prime, like Phaneuf, like Kessel. I mean, if you can move a Joffrey Lubel, if you can find someone to take David Clarkson, the core of this team is no longer. It's definite that they're not good enough to win. So go the way of a Buffalo. Go the way of not Edmonton, but Pittsburgh or Chicago or any of these teams who have built with lottery picks and build the team the right way over 3 or 4 years. That seems to be the prevailing opinion for the way to do things in the league. I think Arizona's trying to do that, and we don't know Buffalo's trying to do that. The question is, does Toronto, the media market, the organization, the corporate ownership of the Leafs have the patience to go through that kind of rebuild, and is that the best thing to do?
A, I don't think they do have the patience for it. But B, I think you have to sort of modify that. I think Damian Cox, what he's really talking about is pretty extreme, and it's really not feasible. It's not going to happen. Now, again, for everybody that wants to move Phil Kessel out, I counter that by saying, well, when does William Nylander become good enough in the NHL to take over Phil Kessel's spot? Because, again, it's nice to have first-round draft picks and start plugging them into your lineup. But, again, when do they start giving you 30 goals a year? It doesn't happen right overnight. It takes 3, 4, 5 years sometimes. So while Damian Cox is saying that, then all of a sudden, if you become a team that has all this money to spend, but you don't have any proven talent, or you only have a couple of guys that are proven talent, then you become the Edmonton Oilers, and there's no guarantee you can come out of that. I mean, that's the thing, and that's why you have to find out who can actually play in that environment and who can't. I still would be inclined to hold on to Kessel and to Van Riemsdyk. I would move Phaneuf if I could, because that is an awful contract, and his return is just not good enough. But the problem is they don't have anybody who could play defense, and they haven't really drafted anybody who could play defense. And so all of a sudden, if they're going to create money to spend, they need a real defensive stalwart. And like Kevin said, they're not really on the market. So then you do have to engineer a trade. And then so if I have to put Van Riemsdyk in a deal to get that guy, then maybe I need to do that. Phaneuf is the guy I would try and move. Guys like Lupul, they're nice, flashy, finesse guys that are only one-way players. And you don't want to be loaded with a team of one-way players. But again, you can't turn guys like Kessel into defensive guys either. You see that it doesn't work out. Barry Trotz hasn't even done that with Ovechkin. He's asked him to be a little more responsible, but at the end of the day, now he's scoring at the same clip he used to. So some of these guys you definitely can work with. Kessel needs to be third or fourth fiddle on the team. He shouldn't be out in front. He shouldn't be expected to be a leader, like I said. But again, there's very few guys with his talent in hockey. So I would also make that goaltending decision already, too. That's something they've belabored for 2 years. They blew it last year. They would have had a lot of trade value for either one of them, and now I'm not even sure there's trade value for either one of them. All that said, I still would keep Bernier, and I would move that goaltending situation out of there just to say, hey, you're our number one. There's always an added confidence for a guy when he knows he's the number one. They're going to say the right things to the media. It doesn't bother me and everything else. But when you got that other guy looking over your shoulder, it's not going to work out well in that market.
Ty, what teams like Buffalo and maybe Toronto, if they go down this road, what that proves to me is that people recognized how much of a magician Peter Chiarelli was in Boston with how he built the Bruins up. I don't think you're ever going to have an unrestricted free agent that had the impact that Zdeno Chara had on the Bruins. And they built, and the core group of this team right now are a bunch of second-round picks: Milan Lucic, Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand. I don't know if Krejci was a second-round pick, but I don't think he was a first. Yeah. They built, and then they benefited from trades like Andrew Raycroft for Tuukka Rask. So that model. That's like winning a lottery ticket. I don't think that a lot of teams have the patience to try and have the ability to try to build their team that way. They're going for the more sure approach of getting lottery picks and drafting the best players in the draft.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at what the Boston Bruins have done. A lot of their money making has really come off these trades that they make, where they pick up a secondary piece that you really haven't heard of, like a Riley Smith or Matt Barakowski, to a lesser degree with Florida when they made the Seidenberg trade back in 2010. So what they do, they put a lot of emphasis on their NCAA scouting. You look at Torrey Krug, that was a free agent signing out of Michigan State, and they also they rely heavily on their scouts in the OHL to find some guys that may fall to the second round, like a Ryan Spooner and Alex Koklachev. These are guys that, by many accounts, they would be first-round picks. You think Koklachev, I think, would definitely be one if he waited a year. But you look at these players, and they rely heavily on their scouting and finding these pieces that you wouldn't really think would work. But they also with that Chara signing, it's the biggest free agent signing, I think, in the history of hockey, if you ask me, to be honest. Yeah. But yeah, Chiarelli's he's done it a different way, I think, with trades. The trades are almost like his drafting in a weird way. When you get a Riley Smith in a deal for Louis Eriksson as well. So they do it a different way. I think it's kind of tough to model yourself after that. You hear people talk about the Boston model. It's kind of hard. I mean, you got to hit gold on a lot of different trades and weird paths that you wouldn't normally go on, it seems.
And you have to find somebody who will give you 2 first-round picks for a player that you really don't want. And for that team to finish 29th and you to draft Tyler Seguin. Kevin, Monday will be 6 weeks away from the trade deadline. The Dubnyk deal was more out of necessity, but as somebody, I think you mentioned, there's a signal that Arizona is going to start, rebuilding and trading off players like Vermette and maybe Yandel and a few others. The landscape it's different. I know that with the former GM of the Leafs, Brian Burke, he hated the trade deadline. He didn't like to make moves like right up to the last minute. He liked to make his moves well in advance of the deadline. Like the Phaneuf deal was made in January, the Francois Beauchemin deal was made in February, so was the Caberlet deal. He stayed away from the deadline, whereas other guys thrive on that last second deal. Is there really any right way or wrong way to approach the deadline from these general managers?
No, but Brian Burke also said that more mistakes are made on trade deadline day and free agent signing day than any other 2 days in the NHL calendar, and that's true. We've actually at USA Today looked at sort of the impact these trades have, and for the most part, they really don't have the desired effect. Obviously, only one team wins the Stanley Cup, and generally, you can plug a hole, but whether or not that player kind of does exactly what you need him to, it doesn't seem to happen the majority of times. But there is certainly a strategy to this. Jim Rutherford is another guy who likes to strike early. He's already done it in Pittsburgh with Perron, and he's looking around trying to add someone else. He doesn't want to wait to the trade deadline. But I do think we're going to see probably as much activity as we normally do. And that's amazing to me because we've pointed out that cap space is at a premium. Everybody's struggling. And yet I have a sense that everybody's going to find a way to get somebody in to help, particularly in the West where, everybody's jockeying for position, trying to avoid certain first-round matchups. So I see a lot happening. And, the Phoenix situation to me really does open it up. What I'm hearing about Yandel is it's going to have to be a great offer if they want to get it done by the trade deadline. He's a player that I think they believe would best be traded in the off season. But saying that, let's see what the offers are, because there are a lot of teams looking for defensemen. So I don't know there is a right way, to be honest. I think it just depends on the technique of the general manager and where you are. Like a lot of GMs have said they like to get them in early so the players have time to get acclimated to the team. That makes some sense to me.
I've heard Burke say that before in interviews, and ironically, last year, usually the teams that make that late move don't have that long run in the playoffs. But last year, you had two teams. I mean, the Rangers made the San Luis deal with Callahan at the deadline, and then you had Gaborik, who was a key part of the Kings being able to win, being added from Columbus. It was more of a salary dump deal than anything. Russ, I don't think. Obviously, with the way San Luis played against Pittsburgh, I don't think the Rangers would have gotten to the final if it wasn't for San Luis.
Yeah, there's no way. I was at that Game 7. I watched that whole series. You're right, and it did have the desired effect, and so did Gaborik, and so it does happen once in a while where you do get the desired effect. But I think now trade deadline day isn't just about improving in the standings. A lot of it's about improving your cap situation, so that in the offseason, you go to the draft, you have more picks, and then you see what you need to pick up free agency over the summer. I think it's 75% that now. I think, you're going to have the 25% of the teams that are still in it that are looking for that piece, but you're going to have a lot more teams looking to dump now. It's becoming the NBA in that regard.
And Ty, if there was one deadline deal that I think the team won the cup in spite of it, it was the Caberlet deal. They added Caberlet thinking he was the point man on the power play that would help them, and their power play had been bad that year. Their power play stayed bad throughout the postseason, and he really struggled, but they still won the cup. It was more on the back of guys like Tim Thomas and Nathan Horton and Chara. But sometimes you can win in spite of it.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes deals, you almost get strong-armed and make a deal you don't want to make. It didn't seem the Bruins really wanted to pick up Andre Mazzaros last year from Philadelphia. It was more of they had to, just based on the injury of Dennis Seidenberg and Matt Barkowski being a 25-year-old thrown into the top 4. So that's obviously tougher on a player like that. But that's a big thing, I think, for a lot of these teams. Is they want to make a deal, but they don't want to make a deal for the sake of making it. And that's a tough decision to make for a lot of these teams, especially when the East is as competitive as it is, and the Western Conference is an absolute nightmare if you're a 2 or a 3 in one of those divisions, I think, based on the matchups. I think that's going to be a big thing for a lot of these teams. You look at salary dumps versus those cheap minor tweaks that you can make to a team that really puts you over the edge. You look at a team like Montreal, when they didn't give up too much for him, but they get Thomas Vanek last year, and he's really almost a non-factor. And versus you look what they've done this year with they signed guys like Tom Gilbert, and he's a cheaper defenseman. Manny Malhotra is another guy they brought in. These are the kind of tweaks you almost want to make to a roster. I know I'm comparing the deadline to free agency, But it seems like you're almost better off buying low on a bottom 6 addition that can really bolster your lineup versus the home run like a Vanek.
Kevin, have you picked up on any? I mean, the landscape is sort of different this year because of those 2 players in June. You know, whether some GMs are going to consciously make the decision to whether to be sellers or buyers earlier, because if they sell early and sort of bottom out, they have a better chance not only to get, McDavid or Eichel, but, this is a draft, and I was doing some draft studying yesterday, where there's the 5 centers who are probably going to be taken in the top 10. This Marner from the London Knights, Zasha, the Czech, and Brian Strom's little brother Dylan Strome with the Erie. Teams who need centers, and of course I'm thinking of Toronto, they might want to make their move early and trade off players to get bad to be in a position to draft rather than waiting to see what they're going to do closer to the deadline.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I've heard is that the teams, are reluctant to give up their draft picks unless they're down near the bottom, like, Pittsburgh was when they did for Perron. You can see and sense that there is a lot of moves that are going to be made based on this year's draft for sure. I don't think there's any question. And, just to follow up what Ty was talking about too in Montreal, like the trade they made early, just getting Gonchar, it fits right into what he was saying. It wasn't a home run swing. It was a depth defenseman ad who, he stepped in, he's played 20 minutes on some nights, he's averaged over 18 minutes, he's been a solid, dependable player. He's only had 2 minuses out of 26 games, which, I think is a little bit surprising given Gonchar's history. But I think he knew when he moved to Montreal what his role was going to be, and I think he knew they just needed a depth, serviceable player who could help and contribute to a team they believe has a chance to contend, and he stepped in and done that. So I think what you see there is just sort of an example of what we were talking about. I think Bergevin has looked at this situation and said, look, everybody's going to be swinging from the home run. I just want to make my defense deep and ready to go now and have it ready, and he's done that.
And he killed 2 birds with 1 stone. I mean, he brought in Gonchar to improve his defense, and he also improved his cap situation down the line because Gonchar is a free agent at the end of the year. He cleared out, Travis Moen in the one deal and cleared out Rene Bourque in another one. So he did both things at once, which is very adept for a general manager. Russ, I don't want to overemphasize the draft thing because I know in Buffalo everybody's focused on it, and now in Toronto, if they do start to tear things down a little bit, the focus is going to be on that as well. But I mean, this draft class, I mean, Marner's a little small; he's 5'11", but Strome is a big kid. I don't know a lot about Zasha, the Czech player, but I mean, you've got players here that. Not to say that they're all going to be impact players at 18 years old, but this is a very good draft.
Yeah, I don't think even Zasha will be an impact player right away, but I think he has more potential than even some of the other guys you're mentioning in Strome and Marner, and Nick Merkley's another big name, and so don't worry about the size though. When you're talking about a guy like Marner now, you just think about what Gaudreau's doing. He's a little bigger than that, and he makes those same kind of plays. So I think we're starting to see like a roadmap for some of those guys, so I wouldn't worry about that. I think the bigger size guys are always going to be in demand at a draft, and that will always elevate them a spot or two. So Dylan Strome, because his brother is already good, and he's been playing in Erie, and he's been playing with McDavid, and plays well with him, plays well without him. People had a chance to see him without him. His stock has risen a lot, and he really has improved a lot to me in a year. Because when I saw him as a younger player a year ago, he was a little apprehensive in the offensive zone. He's not that way now. So is it worth it to get those guys? Sure. But again, I don't think any of those guys that you're talking about, you're plugging right into your lineup.
No.
So you still have to wait for that curve.
No. But this is the thing now. Teams, as you sent to me in a private conversation we had before the show, teams are going to be emphasizing drafting well and getting these players because they can get them cheap. They can hold on to them cheap for 3 years on their entry-level deals. A player who's making $925,000 or $895,000 for 3 years, and then you counterbalance these $5 million deals that you're paying your defenseman like Marc Staal. I mean, that's the only way that these teams can operate in a cap world. So, I think, and if you can move up in a short-term situation and get a young player like that, and he can play in the NHL at 19, the benefits of that are incredible.
Sure, and I also think that's why a lot of teams like Boston, like the Rangers, they look to get college players, because if they get a guy that they know is staying in college for 2, 3, or 4 years, that's like having an escrow plan. You don't have to worry about them on the cap. They keep maturing. They keep getting stronger and better, and then you can eventually bring them in, and they're pretty close because they're already 21, 22 when they come out. So I think that's also a big emphasis on the draft now, and that's why you've seen an increase in NCAA. But also, it's also those free agents from overseas. They're huge too. You look at Bellemare for the Flyers. I'm pretty sure he's getting re-signed. You go look at it. There's a lot of guys. Zuccarello a couple years ago was nowhere, right? And now he's going to get a nice free agent contract somewhere this year. Those are the kinds of guys, if you find one on your team every year, that's a big deal too. That could offset some of those draft picks that don't work out. And player development's huge. I walked in on the Flyers player development early last year and watched Sam Moran rack that machine where you basically jump and jump as high as you can, and you push the bars over the side. And I asked the guy, how high was that? He goes, I can't tell you. And I said, okay, well, it's the top, so I guess it's not really a worry, because next year Moran will jump even higher than that. But it just shows you there was so much off-ice testing this year with Philly and what Hextall brought in that fans were almost getting upset they didn't see enough on ice, because it was just they're measuring their stride now. They're checking because, again, with your jumping ability, that's for your speed burst. They're starting to put all these things together, because just getting a guy out of the draft isn't enough anymore. You've got to turn him into an NHL player, which they're not all ready to be.
Josh, you got some news?
Yeah, not a whole lot today, guys, but a couple of things I want to point out. Victor Hedman, encouraged after skating with the team today, hopes to get back in the lineup Saturday. He's optimistic he'll be back before the break. Bit of a blow to the Lightning back end with him out the last 2 games. In Buffalo, where you are, Mike, Ted Nolan addressing the media not too long ago. Some great comments as usual from Ted Nolan. He says it's extremely hard. It's extremely hard when you ask somebody to do something and they don't do it. What can you do? It's impossible to change everybody. The old slogan in sports is the easiest guy to change is the coach. That's the easy way. I've seen it done lots of times, and is it the right thing to do? I'm not too sure. But that's just the fact in our business. The one thing we are doing, we're not quitting. We're not coming here and worrying about that. I'm worrying about how we can get this thing turned around. Now, Nolan's biggest complaint with the Sabres, who are 1-12-1 in their last 14 games, is that they aren't listening to his teaching. You take the horse to the well, and it's up to him to bend over and drink it, Nolan said. You can't force someone to do something. You can ask them and keep asking them.
That's quite a visual. No, but I mean, first of all, Buffalo has been destroyed by injuries right now. I mean, they weren't a very good team coming into the season. They've had a lot of injuries. They have a lot of players up from their American Hockey League team, but what they're doing is they've been calling up more of the veteran AHL players like Philip Verone and players of that nature, and they're not calling up some of their younger prospects because they want them to learn and grow in the AHL. So he's playing with a line or two of AHL players, and the team is not that good. And this is what I'm sorry. This is what the management of this team, they can't come out and say it, but this is what they want.
Right. He knew that, though. He knew that. Ted Nolan just wants to win. There's no question about it. And I always told people I thought there was going to always be a divide between him and management, because he's going to want to win more than management wants to win, so they can achieve their result too. So I think that's all we're seeing right now. And everybody will just say, "Hey, great quotes," and they'll live with it. But at the end of the day, they're not going to do great. And at the end of the day, they're going to pick high, and they'll sign a few free agents, and they might be a good team in 2 or 3 years. And I think they know that. I just think it's going to be hard for Nolan to deal with that and maybe they'll have to make a change down the road if he can't. If he can, then they'll keep him.
But Ty, they're not going to fire Ted Nolan after this year unless he continues to bitch and moan like this. I don't think they're going to fire him at the end of this year. He's going to have a chance. Whoever they get in the draft, whoever's going to play for them next year, he's going to get a chance to teach Reinhart and to teach either McDavid or Eichel. So why is he doing this?
I think it's frustration. He's had lengthy practices over the past week too with this team. He's been keeping them on the ice. He wants them to get better, and that's frustrating for a coach when you spend so much time, so much energy trying to just be a better coach and teach these guys and get them to play better. And Josh Georges is a guy who's a leader on that team, and he's trying to take on more responsibility as one of the leaders on that team. And it's just hard. You can't turn this into gold overnight. And I think while he realizes that, it's so frustrating, I think, for him as a coach, as a competitive guy, to go to the rink every day and just know that they're going to get their doors blown off by somebody. And it's just, 40 games, that's 20 games longer than I feel like most coaches would last, in terms of their frustration levels. So I can see why he's getting frustrated. Watching this team on a nightly basis is like pulling teeth, really.
And
they need a Casey Stengel kind of manager, like a coach, like an older guy that comes in and he knows what the deal is and he charms the media and loses a lot of games. That's really what they need, but it's hard to find that guy.
And they may get healthier, but the problem is they're also going to move players like Stewart and Stafford and those guys out. So this could get worse. And I worry for Ted Nolan's health if he keeps losing like this. Josh, continue.
Just one other thing, guys, I want to point out. Georges Laraque is back in hockey. He has signed a deal with Fana IHK in Norway. So,
So we're gonna if we can get a game between Modo and that team, we can have Donald Brashear fighting Georges Laraque in a Norwegian-Swedish match.
There you go.
Death match. Yes. Oh boy. Okay, guys.
One final thing: Brad Marchand was not available for media, talking to the media rather today at practice. The team announced that he will be talking tomorrow, basically after the word comes out as to whether or not he is suspended or fined or whatever it may be.
Kevin, you looking forward to anything in particular on the weekend?
Well, I'm actually heading to Pittsburgh to have a little chat with Sidney Crosby about his life and the Penguins and so forth. It's my annual trip in to do a one-on-one with Sidney Crosby, so that'll be in next week's USA Today. I'm also going to do a story on David Perron and whether or not he's the fit that I think a lot of us think he is for Sidney Crosby. He may have hit the lottery when he got traded to Pittsburgh.
Yes. Well, we'll definitely be looking forward to that. And thanks to everybody. Thank you, Ty Anderson. Thank you, Russ Cohen. Thank you, Kevin Allen. And thank you, Josh. We will be back on Monday. Eklund should be back with us for another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.